Fine.
Okay.
No, I'm waiting 1 more minute when he gets the Coke because he said he wants to get the Coke. Sorry. Last night I had 4, so now it's only 1. I'm saying 1 besides for me. Do you think people think it's starting late? We should really tell everybody. It's supposed to start 8 o'clock, yes. No, they're not, you can see.
I'm here.
Yes, I do. Okay, we should just start. Well, where's my shoes? They're coming. Okay. Okay, wait 1 more minute. No, we can tell everybody that's right. The show starts from now on 8 o'clock, Mitzvah Hashem, yeah? Nothing, right? We're starting now. We're up to Daf Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, and we're talking about preparations for Bris Milah, which is done on Shabbos. Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. The Mishnah tells us that if a person didn't grind cumin, which is a medicine for the bris, then what you should do is chew it with the teeth. Says the Gemara. Second line of Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Things which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos for Bris Milah, you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. For example, you're allowed to grind kamoin, and you're allowed to stir oil and wine. As we said yesterday, stirring oil and wine and pouring it over the baby heals the baby. Why is Yom Tov you're allowed to grind it? Since you could do it by adding it to your pot, so therefore it is permitted because you could add it to your pot. So therefore, it's considered oicha nefesh. Once it's oicha nefesh, so you're allowed to do it as well for Bris Milah. If that's the case, yain v'shemen, wine and oil, chozin Shabbos l'chayla. A chayla on Shabbos is allowed to have wine and oil. So let's do that for a chayla, and then once we've got it made, prepared, we can give it to the child who's done Bris Milah. Meaning, the reason we allow kamoin on Yom Tov is because you can use it as a spice. If it's part of oicha nefesh. If it's part of oicha nefesh, so wine and oil on every Shabbos should be permitted. The Tanya. Here we have a brisa. The brisa brings a machlokas tanoim as to whether you're allowed to mix wine and oil for a patient on Shabbos. And the brisa says, "Ein toif in yain v'shemen l'chol b'Shabbos." You're not allowed to. Omar v'shemen l'loz v'shema me'ah. After if Yain v'shemen, that Rameir says you are allowed to. It's machlokas v'shem Tana Kaman Rameir if you're allowed to mix wine and oil. Omar v'shemen l'loz. Pam achas chosh Rameir v'meir. Once Rameir had a terrible stomachache, and the medication, the healing process for a stomachache is what? Is you mix wine and oil and you pour it over the stomach. And we wanted to stir wine and oil. He didn't let us. We said to him like this: you are mere permitted. The Chachamim hold that it's forbidden. If you forbid us from doing it to you, what will happen is people will say, if a mayor is not willing to rely on his own opinion to do it for himself, we certainly can't rely on him. And by a mayor refusing to do it for himself, it's going to cause it that nobody will rely on him. So they said to a mayor, by being machmir, people are going to not be interested in listening to you while you're still alive. So he said, Omar Lonu, a mayor replied, even though I said one way, my friend said the other way. I don't have the heart to go against my friends. We see the Yiras Shamayim the Rameir had, even though he held its mutter, and even though he was suffering, and even though it meant that if he would not follow this halacha, people would ignore him, nevertheless, he preferred to humble himself amongst his friends. But the Maisa, who knew the Machmir Nafshir, if he Machmir himself, and we know that Stam Mishnah is Rameir, because the Rishonim asked the Kasha over here, we're asking a steer from this brisa to our Mishnah. But the problem is that the Brisa itself has a machlekes. Tanakama holds you're not allowed to stir wine and oil. So let's say our Mishnah is going to call Tanakama. So the shouldn't say we don't want to say that because we know that Stam Mishnah is Rameh. So if our Mishnah says it's forbidden, and yet Rameh holds it's permitted, it's a stir. Answers the Gemara, Hosem lo yiboyi leka. Leka means stirring. Hocha boyi leka, but for the baby, you have to stir the wine and oil. So let's do it for the baby without stirring. And says, well, that's what the Mishnah says. This is everything that you're allowed to do one without the other. And indeed, that's how we pass, that you're allowed to wine and oil for a baby who's done bismillah on Shabbos, but without stirring, because stirring is uvda dechoil, and therefore it's forbidden. Now we have a small Gemara regarding Shabbos and Yom Tov. It means Yom Tov you're allowed to do eichel nefesh, you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. But what's the general rule? Let me remember the general rule, what you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, what you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov. We need for that day, but even more than that you need it for that day. No. It depends if it's benefits by doing it that day. That means, for example, you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov because food which is a day old doesn't taste as good as fresh food. So you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov because it tastes better if it's cooked on Yom Tov. But for example, grinding actually is machlekes in the Gemara, but that's for example, harvesting. Why can't you harvest on Yom Tov? The answer is because there's no difference in taste between if you harvest on Yom Tov the day before Yom Tov. So why don't you just harvest before Yom Tov? You can only do something which there's a benefit if you do it on Yom Tov. One second. You're not allowed to sieve mustard. You're not allowed to sweeten it. The way they used to sweeten it is they would take a pile of mustard, drop a hot coal inside it, and that would make the mustard taste sweeter. Why can't you sieve mustard, but you are allowed to sieve an egg? Actually, it doesn't face over Bates. Actually, explains like this. What they used to do is they used to take a big pile of mustard, and they used to take an egg and put it through a sieve. And for some reason, Rashi says that when you put an egg through a sieve, only the yellow goes down, but the white stays up. So why that is permitted, but sieving mustard is forbidden? Rashi explains that that what happens is when you put the egg in the sieve, the yellow goes down, but later the white also goes through. Since the white goes through later, it's not a proper boira. It's just that what happens is the yellow comes first and then the white. So that's not proper boira. It's just delayed reaction of the yellow coming first, then the white. So therefore, that's not proper boira. Yes. Yeah, but since we're talking about it, it's not real boira, therefore they allowed it. If you don't wait. Rashain came with the mustard seeds, the chaff of the mustard seeds would never go down. And therefore that was forbidden. No. This got to do with Yom Tov preparation and Yom Tov for food, which tikkun oichel are permitted and which are forbidden. What? No, even if it's on Yom Tov, it's permitted. I don't think it makes a difference. No, I don't think it makes a difference. So the word carries on. You're not allowed to sweeten mustard with a hot coal. We have another Braisa says you're allowed to. You sometimes have a hot piece of wood and sometimes you have a hot piece of metal. What's the difference between a burning hot piece of wood and a burning hot piece of metal? A burning hot piece of wood, if you drop it into a pile of mustard, what will happen is the wood will go out because mustard will cover it, suffocate it. And then the wood will turn into charcoal. Charcoal is a benefit because it burns better. People like charcoal. A hot piece of metal, burning hot piece of metal, dropped into a pile of mustard, what will happen? The mustard eventually will cool it down, and then what will it be? A plain piece of metal. So therefore, that is not a tikkun. So therefore, by wood, you can't drop wood into mustard because then you're going to create charcoal or coal or whatever you want to call it, and that is a benefit. People, you can buy it in the shop sometimes, like wooden coals which have been singed, but that way they'll burn well for you in the log fire. Charcoal. Now, in metal, once it's cooled down, you've gained nothing from it, so it's not a tikkun. So the Lord says, if you're saying that by wood it's forbidden, so how can you on Yom Tov take meat and put it on a wooden fire? Let's say you take, you want to make what's called shawarma. What do? So you take make wood, put a lot of fire, make a massive bonfire, and then you throw the meat onto the fire, and it roasts it, and then you got geschmack meat. Now, in the process of roasting, when you put meat, raw meat, on a piece of wood, what happens to that wood? It goes out, and the wood becomes charcoal. So therefore, that's no good. So how come you're allowed to do that in Yom Tov? Meaning like this. The best way to get geschmack wood, it's quite a good geschmack meat, is if you roast it on Yom Tov. So what option do you have? You're allowed to do malacha on Yom Tov to get a good piece of meat. So indeed, you're right that putting a cold piece of meat on the fire on Yom Tov will make the wood go out, make it into charcoal, and it should be awesome. But since this is the best way to get good meat, it's permitted. By mustard, why did you do it on Yom Tov? Why didn't you just do it the day before Yom Tov? Put the hot piece of wood into the mustard, and then the mustard will be sweeter, and it doesn't lose the sweetness by waiting for the next day. So therefore, you can't compare making mustard, which can be done before Yom Tov, to making shvama, which tastes better on Yom Tov. So you are allowed to, according to this, you'd be allowed to put raw meat on your fire on Yom Tov. And here the Rishonim discuss a very big shaila. We all know you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, you're allowed to light a fire on Yom Tov. Or you're allowed to put a fire out on Yom Tov. What would you say? Oh, where do you know you can't from? Where do you know from? From Gilstein, from your home? Yeah. But from this Gemara, you should have said to me, yes, you are, because when you throw cold, wet meat on wood, what happens to the wood? It goes out.
Is the wood burning out? The meat maybe not extinguishing the fire.
It does extinguish fire. Yes, it does. If you put
the wood's burning out, the wood's not going to burn that. Comes back on.
No. But that's the way to cook it.
Oh, that's the way to cook it. Very good. But therefore, if let's say, for example, you've got cholent cooking on Yom Tov, and it's cooking much too high, and you wanted to cook better, you want to put it on a lower flame, would you be allowed to or not? No. Oh, you're right, you're not allowed to. Why? This Gemara says you are. So in fact, Rashi Lemaisa holds you are allowed to. But others shouldn't have a different shot in this Gemara. What do you say? Oh. Right, let's say you've got cholent. Yeah, turn the flame down. So he's right. The Basan is right that we're paskin that we don't do it in Yom Tov. Oh, let the bubble, the pot bubble over the thing. Okay, it's a machlekes sheni basically, and machlekes sheni is in this Gemara. Rashi understands that here it actually puts out the fire and it's permitted because it's the only way to get good meat on Yom Tov. So therefore, you not put out the fire. Other Rishonim are different in the Gemara, but the Gemara says that Efshe means that it won't cause the fire to actually go out. You know, it's okay. It says the Gemara very similar. You're allowed to make cheese on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to make cheese on Yom Tov. You're allowed to knead a dough on Yom Tov. What's the difference between making cheese on Yom Tov and making a dough on Yom Tov? What would you answer? Why? Okay, you get a better answer. Cheese, why didn't you do it before Yom Tov? But dough, when you make a fresher the dough, the better it tastes. So you're allowed to make a fresh dough on Yom Tov. You can't make a fresh cheese on Yom Tov. You can't make the dough before Yom Tov. It won't taste as good. That cheese which is 1 day old is good. It's mashma that cheese 1 day old is good. So why can't you do it? Why did you can't do it before Yom Tov because cheese on the same day is good. They didn't mean to say that cheese 1 day old is the best. No, really the cheese 1 day old is the worst. But even 1 day old cheese can still taste okay. So again, making a dough where everybody knows the fresher the dough, the tastier the bread. So if you're allowed to make a dough on Yom Tov, because if you're allowed to knead on Yom Tov. But making cheese is forbidden. It's very interesting because the halachas of Yom Tov are not so straightforward. And here's one of the main sugyas where the Gemara over here differentiates. Cheese is forbidden because you could have made the cheese early on. But dough is permitted. You're allowed to knead a dough. Or for example, making a roasted meat on the fire is permitted because that makes the meat tastier. If you cook, let's remember, those days didn't have freezers. If you didn't have a freezer, if you cook meat a couple of days before Yom Tov, time coming to Yom Tov wasn't geschmack, it wasn't the same. Shein came, for example, mustard, heating up mustard to sweeten it, that tastes just as good if you do it a couple of days before Yom Tov. The word is like this. Now, what happens is, as Levi explained very nicely, you've got after the milah, you have to put a bandage on. Now, the Gemara over here goes at great length, 3 different ways to avoid one problem. Bandages often have threads coming off, right? They often have threads coming out of them. Now, what happens is, when the bandage gets put over the bris milah, it's possible that the thread will get caught and crusted into the ava. And therefore, what will happen is, when you pull the bandage off, you will hurt the baby and make him a krus shofar, cut off his limb. So therefore, you have to make sure that the threads are not on the cut, but higher than the cut. So what says we have three different ways. What? Turn it inside. Very good. The most of that. Omar Abai, Omri Aim, my witness said, that you should turn the face, you should turn it loy. You should turn the end upwards. Why? Maybe a thread will get attached. A thread of it will get attached. The gid will be cut off. The mother of Abai, meaning again his witness, or the kista la plago. She would do even better. She would make a lining to the bandage. If you look inside the jacket, there's a lining. And what happens is the lining, it protects threads which would come out of the suit. So she would half the bandage cover it with a lining, so that way it would not harm the baby. And one final way to do it, look at the less if you've got no bandage, take a rag, this sifsa that's got a hem. You should put the hem at the bottom because the hem is always tighter and therefore you can wrap it better. But then fold it back upwards. So therefore this is the bandage. And you put it across, so you put the hem part, which is the bottom at the bottom, but then you fold it back upwards, so that way the ends of the threads don't get caught into the ava. So therefore we've got three different ways. Either you make a lining, or you fold the hem back upwards, or you put the end of the thread, the part where the threads are sticking out, you put it facing upwards, not downwards, so the threads shouldn't get chas v'shalom congealed into the ava, and in that way chas v'shalom cause the baby to be harmed. And now the Gemara tells us a bit of health issues with babies, which comes in. Omar Abai, Omri Ein. Abai never had a mother, was his witness. He had a mother, but was his witness. Said, "How you look at the mitkose? Why if the baby is born when you cannot see the place where he goes for number two? The anus is either so blocked up that you can't find it. So what should you do? The shayfe mishche, you should smear the baby's bottom with oil. Then make the baby face the sun. The zig, where it's loose, where it's transparent, where it's clear. So that obviously is the place where the hole should be. Liquid visar also, take a piece of barley and tear the hole. Shesi be'erev, horizontal and vertical. But not with a metal. Mission dissolve, that will make it swell. So by smearing it with oil and facing it to the sun, a person can then see where the hole is supposed to be. A baby that doesn't suckle one, make a pume. His mouth has gone very, very cold. And that's why it's not nursing properly. Take a cup full of coals, put it next to his mouth. The mouth will get warm, and then the baby will nurse well. A baby that's not breathing at all, you should fan it with a big fan, that will make it breathe. That finds struggle with breathing, it can breathe but badly. You take the afterbirth from the mother, you should slide it over him, the baby will breathe. Look at the cotton, a baby which is very, very thin. It's too thin. Still to the image. You should take the mother's afterbirth, and you should smear it on him. Now, the afterbirth is shaped a little bit like a triangle, and therefore it's got a narrow end and a wide end. There's a big question. It's not the placenta, even though you're right. There are those who say the Rashi does say more places placenta, but most places, the way Rashi explains it, is that some babies are born with a skin around them. It's not by every birth it is. So now it's shaped a bit like a triangle. So you've got a narrow and a wide. If you want the baby to get fatter, what you do is you smear it from the narrow downwards. And that way what happens is the baby, the afterbirth is going along the baby from thin to fat. And that way you're showing the baby you want to get wider. If the baby's too fat, you smear it the other way around, from fat to thin. And you're showing the baby that you want it to get thinner and thinner. So if it's too thin, from the thin side to the fat side. If the baby's too fat, from the wide to the narrow. So that way, by sliding the afterbirth from whichever direction you do it, will make the baby either fatter or thinner. How you look at the sumak, a baby which is very red, the blood is not absorbed into the flesh. The blood, Rashi has two very interesting things. That it's possible for the baby, the blood is not absorbed in the body. So the blood is between the flesh and the skin. And says Rashi that if you do bris milah, two things can happen. What are the two things can happen? One, the baby will die because a lot of blood will come out. Secondly, you'll be over that you would have done bris milah, because bris milah is the fact that you're taking blood out of the place of where the cut is. Dam bris. This won't be dam bris because it's not blood of the bris. It's blood which is lying above the flesh, between the flesh and the skin. So if a baby's got too red, you should not do bris milah. Rather, what you do, you should wait at ivla beidume until the blood gets swallowed into the body. V'lemale, then do bris milah. Do yoik. If the baby's green or yellow, it means the blood has not been produced. You should wait at enough of beidume until the blood comes and then do bris milah. So you've got two explanations over here. If it's red, the blood is in there, but it's not absorbed in the body. If it's green, if the baby's yellow or green, then he's not even got the blood at all. You have to wait until he gets, and that's the yellow of nowadays. In other words, tells a very short story. The Tanya Mam Nosan. I once went to a town and crossed the sea. A woman came in front of me. The first son died from Bismillah. The second son died from Bismillah. I saw he was red. Wait. And the baby survived because he waited for the blood to get absorbed. But he couldn't say Nosna Bavli al Shmi. They gave the name Nosna Bavli because he saved his life by telling them don't do Bismillah until the red has gone away. I went to Kaputkia. He had no blood inside him. Wait for the blood to go inside him. So there's two kinds of medical reasons why you have to wait. Either it's too red, and that means the blood is there, but it's between the flesh and the skin, or the child looks palish, greenish, yellow, and that means that there is no blood, and you have to wait for the blood to be produced. And that's the end of the health aspects of the baby. We're up to Daf Kuflam Dalad on base top of the page. In the olden days, washing a baby was very, very important. Nowadays, Mishavur says, Nishtanu ativim, people don't need it, and therefore washing a baby is not permitted on the day of Bris Milah. But the Maisa, in those days it was. You can sprinkle in him with your hand. You can't sprinkle with a cup, you have to sprinkle with your hand, with your fingers. You can even wash him on the third day, which is Shabbos. If you know the story of Shechem, that they kidnapped Dinah, so Shimon and Levi told them the plan, they should all do bris milah, and then they killed them all out. Which day did they kill them all out? On the third day. It's a right that the third day of the bris is the dangerous day. There's a very, very big machlokes Rishonim. Many of the Rishonim argue this point, as to whether it doesn't mean that only the third day is dangerous, and the day 1 and day 2 is not dangerous, or it means that all 3 days are dangerous. Most of the Rishonim hold all 3 days are dangerous. That means the first day, second day, and the third day the baby is not well. It's only that also the third day. And some say that it's dafka the third day, that only the third day is not well. If all 3 days are not well, so why did Shimon and Levi wait for the third day? Why didn't they kill them all on the first day? If all 3 days a person after Bris Milah is ill, why did they wait for the third day? Why didn't they just kill them all on the first day? Yeah, the Rishonim say like this, that it is true that the pain is equal the whole 3 days. But after 3 days of being in bed in pain, you're weaker than having been only 1 day in bed in pain. So it's like 3 days of being a flu. It's for the wait for the third day. Okay. Safek, a child which is a safek, for example, in the olden days, a baby that was born after 8 months would not survive. 7 months would, 8 months would not, and 9 months would. Very, very strange scientifically. But like this, 7 months a baby would survive, 8 months not, 9 months would. So if a baby is born and you're not sure if it's 8 months or 7 months, by androgynous, or a baby which has got both male and female signs, body parts, Shabbos, a bit of matter about androgynous, a bit of androgynous, the more describes as a greater length. Says the Gemara. The Mishnah is a little bit contradictory. The Mishnah starts off by saying that you're allowed to wash a child before and after bris milah. And then the Mishnah carries on. Now, the simple understanding of that statement is that you're allowed to wash a child any way you wish. You can wash a child, meaning baths, wherever you want, you can wash a child. And then the Mishnah carries on, you can sprinkle, but not with a keli, just with your hand. What's going on over here? A minute ago, you just told me you can wash him. So why do you say only sprinkle with your hand and not with a keli? So Gemara over here gives two completely different answers. First one brings one answer, then the second answer. The first answer is that means the first statement of the Mishnah was just like a heading. You're allowed to wash a child. Then the Mishnah goes into the details. So now, what does it mean to wash? You're allowed to wash it before or after. But how are you allowed to? Meaning that this Mishnah is limiting. First Mishnah says you're allowed to wash, but how much you're allowed to wash? Only by sprinkling and only with a hand and not by a keli. That means the Mishnah starts off saying you're allowed to wash, but limits it only a hand and only by sprinkling. Says the Gemara, the expression washing seems to be saying that you're allowed to wash completely and not just sprinkling. It's mashma, you're allowed to wash properly. Rava explains the Mishnah as saying two completely different statements. The Mishnah starts off talking about the day one. Day one, meaning the day of the bris milah, you're allowed to wash both before and after, and you're allowed to wash with a keli, and you're allowed to wash with your hand. You're allowed to wash any way you wish, because on the day one, it is very, very dangerous. But if it's the third day, which the Tanna Kama holds is not dangerous, then you are allowed to. Meaning like this. According to Rava, the first statement of the Mishnah is you're allowed to wash any way you want. That's the first day. You're only allowed to sprinkle. That's referring to the third day. Comes along Rabbi Nazar and says, no, I don't agree with you. Or even on the third day, you're allowed to wash. Even on the third day, not just on the first day, but even also on the third day. Let's summarize again. The Mishnah starts off by saying a statement you're allowed to wash. Then the Mishnah says only by sprinkling. Asks the Gemara, what are you talking about? First you say you're allowed to wash, then you say only by sprinkling. Answers the Gemara, one answer is that when it says you're allowed to wash, it just meant a general statement. You're allowed to wash. Then the Mishnah specifies what manner of washing, not any manner you wish, only through sprinkling and only through your hand and not through a bowl. That's one answer. That's a big chumrah. It comes out that you're never allowed to wash properly, ever. Because even on the day one, you're not allowed to wash properly. You're only ever allowed to sprinkle, no more. That's one explanation in our Mishnah. The second explanation in our Mishnah is Rava's explanation. Rava's explanation is that the first statement of the Mishnah is talking about day one. Day one, the day of the bris milah, before and after, you can wash any way you wish. You're allowed to wash properly. Then the Mishnah carries on, you're allowed to sprinkle. That's referring to day three. Day three, you're allowed to sprinkle. And on that, Rabbi Nazar comes along and argues and says, no, I don't agree, that even on day three, you're allowed to wash properly. So according to Rava, on the first day, are you allowed to wash properly? Yes, so that's part of the Mishnah, you're allowed to wash properly. So the word carries on. Tanya Kavosit Rava, Rabbi Weiss that says explicitly like Rava. On the first day, you can wash the normal way. But if the third day is a Shabbos, you can only sprinkle with your hand. You're allowed to wash properly, even on Shabbos, even on the third day. Even I've got a proof, I've got a sign. So therefore, you see that when they're in pain on the third day, and when you sprinkle, going back to the Tanna Kama, obviously, not with a cup or a bowl, and not with any kind of container. Also, the Tanna Kama, that's referring to the Tanna Kama. So the Tanna Kama says that you can only sprinkle with your hand and not with a bowl, a cup, or anything like that. Says the Gemara, why does the Gemara call this only a sign, a hint? Why not say this is absolute proof? The fact that Shimon and Levi waited to the third day to destroy Shechem is a proof that the third day is a dangerous day. So why did Rabbi Nazar say to you, I don't have a proof, I've only just got a sign to indication, I've got an indication that I'm right. Why is this only an indication? It's a proof. Answers the Gemara, an adult, his skin doesn't get healed quickly. Hai means quickly. But a child, a baby, his skin heals quickly. Therefore, The fact that Shimon and Levi waited for the third day to destroy Shechem doesn't prove regarding what would the case be by a baby. Let us summarize. A Blazon Azariah holds you allowed to wash properly on the third day. He says, I've got an indication from Shechem. The reason it's not a real proof is because they were adults. Adults take much longer to heal. According to the Tanna Kama, so according to the first Malach of the Gemara, you're never allowed to wash properly. You're only ever allowed to sprinkle. Now, when the Mishnah says you're allowed to wash, the Mishnah just means a general statement, and later the Mishnah then qualifies it as saying, but only by sprinkling. According to Rava, according to the Tanna Kama, you're allowed to wash properly on the first day. On the third day, you're only allowed to sprinkle. Says the Gemara, the person came in front of Rava and they had a baby on the first day and wanted to know, can they wash properly or can they sprinkle? Only sprinkle. He said you can wash properly like he and the subchat in the Mishnah. Rava got no one. He realized he'd done a mistake. And no, the first pshat was said by Yehuda and Rabba. Their explanation of the elders, Sabi means elders. The explanation of the elders, Lomali, why did I get involved? Why did I argue in an explanation of the elders? We had a Bryce that said explicitly like you, that according to the Tanna Kama, you're allowed to wash on the first day, so why are you upset with yourself for passing like them? Even though the Bryce is like me, the Mishnah is more meduyak like them. Why? The Blazon says allowed to wash on the Shabbos, which was the third day. As this with outside. What is the basis of the machlekes between Tanna Kama and Blazon Azariah? According to the first malach, it was Tanna Kama says you're only allowed to sprinkle. Comes along Blazon Azariah and says no, you're also allowed to wash. That's the first malach. According to Rava, Tanna Kama says you're allowed to wash on the first day. Blazon Azariah says you're also allowed to wash on the third day. Says Rava, if the Mishnah meant like me, it would have said, and you can wash on the third day. Not that you can wash on the third day. Because according to Rava, even the Tanna Kama holds you allowed to wash. The only difference between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Elazar is simply, can you also wash on the third day? According to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabba, they explained that according to Tanna Kama, you're not allowed to wash. You're only allowed to sprinkle. So then it makes a lot of sense that Tanna Kama says you're allowed to sprinkle. Comes along Rabbi Elazar and says, no, you're allowed to wash. According to Rava, the Tanna Kama himself said you're allowed to wash on the first day. The only argument was that according to Blazon Azariah, you're also allowed to wash on the third day. Says the Gemara, if the Tanna Kama says you're allowed to wash on the first day, he should have said you're also allowed to wash. That means if Blazon Azariah if the Tanna Kama holds you're allowed to wash, and Blazon Azariah is just adding that you're also allowed to wash on the third day, he should have said and you're allowed to wash on the third day. Because even according to the Tanna Kama, you're allowed to wash. Actually, according to their pshat, that the Tanna Kama holds you're only allowed to sprinkle. And the Rabbi Elazar says not only allowed to sprinkle, you're allowed to wash. So he's not adding, the Tanna Kama never allowed you to wash. So Blazon Azariah says, don't say sprinkling, say washing. But according to Rava, the Tanna Kama also says allowed to wash, they should have said, and you can wash on the third day. Says the Gemara, Dimi came from Etzal, Amar Belazar, Halacha Blazon Azariah. The halacha is like Blazon Azariah, they're allowed to wash on the first day and the third day. They asked in Etzal the following question: do they mean that you're allowed to wash the entire baby or just the area of the bris milah? When Rabbi Elazar said you're allowed to wash the entire body, not just the area of the milah. Why? If it's only the area of the milah, Rab holds that anybody, whenever you have a wound, you're allowed to take hot water and pour it over the wound. So if it is true that the whole dinner of Blazon Azariah was only regarding washing the area of the bris milah, what was the big chiddush? Rav holds that whenever you have a wound on Shabbos, you're allowed to pour hot water over it. The chiddush, no, but the Mishnah also says before and after. It's mashma, there's a chiddush also in the after. What? Oh, that's more answers. But let's get a question clear. According to Rav, that you're always allowed to pour hot water. So what's the chiddush for Blazon Azariah? It must be the chiddush is that you're allowed to do the entire body. Says the Gemara, as Levi says, that which Rav permits you to pour hot water means hot water which you heated before Shabbos, you're allowed to pour on Shabbos. But Rav, of course, will not allow you to go and cook hot water on Shabbos just to be able to pour over a wound. Of course, Rav forbids it. And of Loza Navazai, our Mishnah was coming to tell you that you're allowed to actually heat up water. So that's what he's coming to answer. Says the Gemara, Maskiflo Avdimi. So Avdimi asked on Rabbi Yosef's question, who told you that our Mishnah is talking about hot water which they heated on Shabbos? Maybe our Mishnah is only talking about hot water which came before Shabbos. It's quite a complicated cheshbon, but let's just try and get to clear. We said we passed like a Rosh that you're allowed to wash a baby on Shabbos. We asked, that was the first thing we said. The second thing we said, does it mean just the area of the mirror, or does it mean the whole body? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef came along and said, of course, Yaakov came along and said, of course it means the whole body. Because if it's just the area of the wound, just the area of the mirror, what's the chiddush? Everybody's allowed to pour hot water on the wound on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, no. Because maybe in our Mishnah is talking about heating up water on Shabbos, which is not permitted generally, while normally it's only permitted hot water which has already been heated up. Says the Gemara, maybe our Mishnah is also only talking about hot water which was heated up before Shabbos. Who told you that our Mishnah is talking about water that you're allowed to actually go and heat it up on Shabbos? Says the Gemara, I wanted to reply. Rabbi Yosef replied before me what I was going to say. What I wanted to answer, Rabbi Yosef already answered. Why? It's a danger. Meaning, of course, our Mishnah is talking about heating up water on Shabbos. Because our Mishnah is clearly talking about a child who's in a matter of danger. It's just a bismillah. If it's a matter of danger, of course, you have to heat up water on Shabbos. So therefore, comes back the proof, meaning like this. Our Mishnah is talking about heating up water on Shabbos. Since it's talking about heating up water on Shabbos, so therefore you can't compare it to the case of pouring hot water on a wound. And therefore you've got no proof whatsoever as to whether you're allowed to wash the entire baby or the area of the mirror. Or if you say you're only allowed to wash only the area of the mirror, what's the chiddush? Every person in the world is allowed to do that. The answer is not true. Every person is allowed to pour hot water which has been heated before Shabbos. Our Mishnah is telling us that you're allowed to even heat up water specifically for the purpose of pouring it over the mirror. Says the Gemara, Lemaisa, what do we paskel? Okay, also it's benami. Also, Rovin, Oma Bavo, Oma Belozov, Oma Lo, Oma Bavo, Oma Bichnon, Aloch Kelos with Azaya, Beimecham Shuchmu Shabbos, Beimecham Shuchmu Erev Shabbos, Benachotz Kol Gufoi, Benachotz Milam, Tishos Kanoiloi. We pass that you're allowed to wash a baby, not just the area of the milah, but the entire body, and not just with water that was heated up before Shabbos, but water that was heated up on Shabbos. So you're allowed to actually go and make a hot water bath for a baby on Shabbos for the sake of Bismillah. Lemaisa, and the whole body. Lemaisa, as I mentioned before, the Mishnah Berurah says, and nowadays it's become a Shinui Ateva. I remember once I was sitting having Islamina, and somebody came in and said his wife likes to have a bath during labor. Makes her feel much, much more relaxed. He didn't mean a water birth, no. Before the birth, she wants to heat up the water. And he picked up a sefer, I remember the sefer. The sefer says like this, that you can heat up only once she starts proper labor. If you remember, more earlier said there are three signs of proper labor, either bleeding, or that she can't walk, or sitting on the birthing stool. So he wanted to say on this thing. So the man said straight away, that was a bit of an argument. If he said, that's no good. Because for her, the whole pleasure is that long before all of this happens, she wants to have a bath. Let's say she feels the beginning of contractions on Shabbos. You're going to tell her to wait until the last stage and then make a hot water bath? So anyway, so he said to him the way you should do it, get a guy to do it. Not so clear that it's permitted. He said, if it's matzah which is actually in birth, that would be permitted. But to have one... Not for the Mishkan was only permitted by a goy, not that. I'm saying you can't do derivative. Yeah, no, because normally for birth we are mechal Shabbos.
For the stage.
Oh, I tell you what the big problem is. If you live, let's say, in Kiryat Sefer, which I did, then what happens is the nearest hospital is almost an hour away. So when they're out of the Chal Shabbos to call an ambulance or to call a taxi, you don't have to wait until the last minute because by then it's going to be too late. So you see that you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos in preparation for something when you know later you're going to be Mechal Shabbos. Okay. Oh, the question is if she felt that it would help her because before then, okay, tell her to get going to turn on her water. Says the Gemara like this. Gufa. Go a tiny bit about pouring hot water. Omar Rab, in Moin and Chamin Hashem Nagabe Makah b'Shabbos, you're allowed to pour hot water and oil on the wound on Shabbos. V'shron Omar Noisen Chutz the Makah, you put it out of the wound. V'sheis the Makah, and then the water flows down to the wound. That's actually Paskin. Let's say you've got a cut on your hand, and you want to put hot water on it because you feel it makes it better. You should pour the hot water higher up and let the hot water roll down onto your hand. The only reason is because Chazal was scared that if you get busy with medication, you might come to grind some on him. And here, if you do it like that, you'll remember it's Shabbos and you won't come to do that. I'm talking about in a way where you're doing it as a medical thing, where you're adding hot water and oil. I'm talking about where it's a thing. Washing, plain washing, which a person does for normal washing, is not considered a before. It says clearly in the Braisa that you don't put hot water on a bandage to put it on the wound on Shabbos. And it's also mishum schita. That has nothing to do with refuah. There, because you're putting it on the bandage. Since you're putting it on the bandage, you'll then come to squeeze it out. We don't want you to squeeze it out. There we're talking about where the bandage is already on the wound. So the Gemara and the Havamim at least understood that you're not going to squeeze it out. So therefore, since the bandage is already on the wound, before we would talk about putting hot water and oil on the bandage and then later putting the bandage on the wound. So the Gemara answered the reason it's forbidden because of schita. But now we're talking about when the bandage is already actually on the wound. So we're also concerned about schita. You can put it out of the wound and let it flow down onto the wound. The Gemara over here tells us that there are different kinds of material. Some materials just protect, like a plaster. Some materials, for some reason, interesting, some cloths, by just putting the cloth on the wound, it would have the ability to heal the body. So now, if something which just protects the body from getting more not well, that's permitted on Shabbos. Something which heals the body is forbidden. You're not allowed to do a on Shabbos. The Gemara says like this. You can put a dry sponge or a dry cloth. But not a dry reed, and not cut pieces of cloth which are dry. Why? Because they actually heal. It says because moich and ksisin is basically the same thing. Moich is just a piece of cloth which is left over from like pieces of felt cloth which are left over. And ksisin is the same thing. So why in the ratio do you say it's permitted and the safe it's forbidden? With new ones, then they heal. Old ones, they don't heal. That new cloths, they heal. So therefore, if you put a new fresh cloth on a wound, it heals. An old cloth on a wound does not heal. And therefore, a fresh one is forbidden, an old one which doesn't heal, it just protects, is permitted. So if somebody would ask, are you allowed to put a plaster, besides for the problem of peeling the plaster, things like that, and sticking it, are you allowed to put a bandage on? Of course you are allowed to on Shabbos. Now what happens about putting on a plaster, not plaster, a splint, where it is going to actually heal, where it's not just to protect, but it actually has healing properties, like a compress or active medication. So most cases when there's a splint and things like that, it's usually a proper chayla, and the proper chayla or tzar kol haguf, it's permitted. But in the case where it's just a mild wound, and you want to put on a plaster which actually heals, that's forbidden. You can only do something which protects, but healing is forbidden. The Torah says, the letter Vav is actually spare. It's all. And from this extra Vav, we're going to dash notes of drashas. The Ritva asks the Kasha, how can you learn many drashas from one thing? And the Ritva answers, it's all one drasha. It's all one idea. It's just simply different ways of us seeing one drasha. A suffix Ola does not push away Shabbos. This asks the Kasha that he doesn't understand why in the world would you need a pasuk to tell you that a suffix Ola is not Deiches Shabbos. Of course not. If it's a suffix, then by Chetesa, since you don't know if it's a mitzvah b'smila, you can't do it on Shabbos. Minchas Chinuch got all kinds of tirutzim, this very complicated tirutzim. One teretz he says is that if you do it, let's say a person has got a suffix Ola and he does b'smila on Shabbos. Would you say he has been suffix b'chal Shabbos because might have done b'smila and done a mitzvah, or maybe not, he's on a veil? Or would you say he's definitely done an Avera? What would you say? Oh, very good. What's your raya?
Shabbos wasn't doich for someone else.
Oh, that's what the Chitzchuch says. That when a person does Bismillah on a Sofik Ola on Shabbos, he's Vaday Mechal Shabbos, not a Sofik Mechal Shabbos. Why? Because the Torah taught us that a Sofik Ola is not an Ola, Legabi Shabbos. So therefore it's not Doich Shabbos. Okay. Ola say Vaday Doich Shabbos, Ve'adrignus Doich Shabbos. Adrignus is not Doich Shabbos. Rav Yehuda Omer Adrignus Doich Shabbos is Doich Shabbos. The Gemara says later. But on the shkolas, if a person, according to Rabbi Yehuda, an adroignus that doesn't do Bismillah gets kots. Or also, Vada Deiches Shabbos, we don't know the Ashmoshes Deiches Shabbos. If he's born Ben Ashmoshes, it's not Deiches Shabbos. It's one of the complicated questions. A person has a baby Friday afternoon. How many minutes after Shkia? Is it Friday? Is it Shabbos? It depends who you ask. But if it's a suffix, it's not Deiches Shabbos. Or also, Vada Deiches Shabbos, we don't know that Kishul Mo Deiches Shabbos. If it's born already, Mol is not Deiches Shabbos. So therefore, how many things have we learned out from Mol also? It has to be Vadai, not Sophic, Vadai, not Adrogenus, Vadai, and not Ben Ashmoshus, and Vadai, and not when he was born Mol. 4 droshes from Mol also. And as I said, the Ritva understands it's all one drosha, but just 4 facets of the drosha. That what it means is, also, it has to be his Ola, a definite, clear his Ola Yibchal Shabbos. Now here it gets a bit more complicated. So somebody who was born Mohol, right? The person born so how many people do you know that were born Mohol? Moshe Rabbeinu, who else? There's literally dozens of people. Eliyahu Novi, God, the son of Yaakov, Shem, some people say, Avon, probably some people say. There's a lot of people that people say that was what? So yeah, some say, okay, I don't know what kind of Ola. Oh, so we'll see. Oh, that's in one case. You still have to take from him some blood. Because the Ola is hidden. Let's say a gay wants to become a gay. A girl wants to become a gay. He had Bismillah. Why did he have Bismillah? So Rashi says maybe it was an Arab, right? Maybe it was an Arab, was a Muslim. You don't need to do a dam bris. This gets more complicated. Let's try and keep as cheshbon as we can. We have a machlokes within a machlokes. A baby that's is born already circumcised. So it's ready more. We have a machlokes what to do over here. According to the Tanakama of this price, there's machlokes b'Shammai b'Hillel. Does he have to do dam bris or not? B'Shammai say that you have to, and they still say that you don't have to. Comes on the second time of Reb Shimon, and he says, no, you're wrong. Everybody agrees you do have to. When was the machlokes is referring to a goy. Just keep that in mind. Again, a baby born more, according to the first explanation, it's machlokes b'Shammai b'Hillel, you have to do anything at all. According to the second explanation, everybody agrees you have to do something. Only by a goy we have the shaila. Now the Bible said 4 expressions, not sofik, and it said 4, not sofik, not adrogenos, not ben ashmoshes, and not nolad mo. So what does sofik mean? It can't be adrogenos because you mentioned it later. It can't be ben ashmoshes because you mentioned that later. So it says v'lo sofik doiches Shabbos, which case is considered sofik? It says to include the Torah Abanon ben Shiva, baby which is after 7 months, b'chelen olavas Shabbos, or ben Shmoina if it's 8 months, in b'chelen olavas Shabbos. Safik ben Ches, Safik ben Shmoina, in Mechelen on Shabbos, because we believe that the baby won't survive. When Shmoina evidence like a stone, it is muktzah, but also the talteloi. Avol imo sheichum and niktim sakana. If a woman has too much milk, it is dangerous for her. So when the baby is born and the baby is going to die, she can nurse him simply because to relieve her pain. So if you look at this thesis, the third from bottom, it's the end, almost the end of this Amud ben Shmoina who Kevin was the talteloi near Levi. Nowadays, any baby that's born, even if we don't know if it's going to survive or not, you're allowed to pick it up or not choshesh for this Gemara, because we don't know whether the baby is going to live or not. In the older days, they could tell straight away whether the baby was definitely going to die or not. So therefore, once we knew that the baby was definitely not going to survive, it was muksa. But this nowadays we're not talking. That's indeed, this whole Gemara is almost not negaya because of that Gemara. Okay, says the Gemara. And this asks the kasha. Look at the next thesis. There's sakana. There's a few theses. This is sakana's cholok sheish b'haba b'dadim. There's a lot of whenever there's a lot of milk in the dadin, it's dangerous. But Yoda Rashford never knew. My ear sakona. Why do you have to come on to sakona? Why? Because it's malacha shein tzricha legufa, but the Ba'isa is be mutter because of pain. The halacha is we're allowed to burst a pimple, a boil on Shabbos because of pain. So why can't she nurse because of pain? They will ask Kasha, why are we here in sakona? Why do you need sakona? Okay, so more is like this. Because the suffix was referring to a baby which we're not sure if it's going to survive. You can't do Vesmila on Shabbos. What?
Maybe you could do a better job than she expressed.
So.
There's milk left in the breast.
Yeah, but why is the Ba'isa saying sakona? Because it's dangerous. Yeah, but why, just say because it's sa. Sakona is sakonas nefashos. Sa is pain. You don't need to come on to sakona. Even if it wouldn't be sakona, if it was just painful, it would be mutter. Why do you have to say in place sakona?
Because if it would have just been
for pain, yeah.
Then she can express. The baby does a better job of getting rid of the
And
milk.
And now that it's sakona, no, I don't understand. Because no, sure. If she
can
could do it,
then you would say you can't touch the thing. You're not allowed to do upset and dosh. Just do dosh.
Anyway, she's not touching the baby. We're talking about in case where she's not touching the baby. But also the Tata, she's not going to touch the baby. She's just bending over and get the baby to suck like that. Or itme, Vava Malachik Tanakama, the Lachak Tanakama, that the Shama Bisil argue as to whether a baby that's born more, whether he needs to do Bismillah or not. Very tragic story of Adabah, they started Le'au Yanuka, Kishumor. Adabah had a baby born that had already done Bismillah. Ahadre Aklesa Moali. He looked for a moil to do the Bismillah on Shabbos. He held that even the baby that's born more, you're allowed to do Bismillah on Shabbos. We'll see in a minute why he held like that. But he held that you're allowed to do Bismillah on the baby that's not more. But none of the moyalim agreed with him. So nobody wanted to do Bismillah because they all said, we don't want to Mechal Shabbos. So he did it himself. At the Shavya Kus Shavcha. So he made him, and he cut by mistake, he cut off the Eva, and he made him a Kus Shavcha. Because he did by mistake. From here you see that it's Kedai to get a good moyal. Not to try lying on. You see over here. So it's a terrible story. But we have to work out now. Omar, so he said, Tasely, I deserve it. Oviyad the Rav, I went against Rav. Omar Leah Nachman the Shmuel Ova. You were also over on Shmuel. Let's summarize if you can. We had a shaila about Noilad Mol, what's the din? Tanakama said, a machlikas b'shama b'silo. That b'shama said you have to do atofas dam bris, b'silo say you don't. Rabbi Shimon Elazar says everybody agrees you have to do atofas dam bris. Rav passes like Tanakama, Shmuel like the second man, like Shimon Elazar. So he said I went against Rav because according to Rav, there's machlikas b'shama b'silo. B'shama say you have to do atofas dam bris, b'silo say you don't. So therefore, it's not necessary to do it on Shabbos. I went against Rav. Said to him, Nachman, no, you went against Shmuel as well. Because even though Shmuel holds that everybody holds that a baby that's born more, you have to have tougher stamp bris, but who told you that to do it on Shabbos? Maybe you're only allowed to do it on weekday. Shmuel just said that Bein according to his Bein according to his Shama, you have to have tougher stamp bris. But nobody said that you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. And it says, no, who saw that? He held Vadei Olo Kavushahi. That Shmuel who says that everybody holds you have to have tougher stamp bris, it's because the Olo is there, it's just hidden. The Itma Rabba Omar Hashinon Shema Olo Kavusha, or just Choshesh maybe there's Olo Kavushi. It's definite Olo. We have a Machlekas over here. According to Rabbi Shimon who says that both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel hold you have to do a tougher stamp bris, is it because we're not sure if there's an Olo there, or we're sure there's Olo there? It says Omar Yosef Minah. How do I know that there's definitely an Olo there? Everybody agrees that somebody who's born more, you have to tough stamp bris. Whether you're allowed to mechal Shabbos. So Shabbos mechal Shabbos. So in mechal Shabbos. The fact that he said this, so but there's a couple said this. He's arguing the Tanakama. Is it not? Can you not be medayek? Can you not deduce from the fact that Raza Kappa says it that the Tanakama holds mechal Shabbos, that everybody agrees that you are mechal Shabbos, and the Raza Kappa comes on and says no. Only according to Beis Shammai mechal Shabbos, but not according to Beis Hillel. But maybe not. Maybe the Tanakama held that nobody says allowed to mechal Shabbos, and came along with Raza Kappa and he said that according to Beis Shammai you are allowed to mechal Shabbos. Says the go. It says more. Raza Kappa to Shabbos. Would Raza Kappa come to teach me Beis Shammai Shitta A person never comes along to teach you Beis Shammai. Why? Because we don't pass like Beis Shammai anyway. So therefore, Reza Kappa won't come in to teach me Beis Shammai. He must be coming to teach me a Chiddush. If you say that according to Tanna Kama, everybody holds out to Mechal Shabbos, comes along Reza Kappa says no, according to Beis Hillel, you're not allowed to Mechal Shabbos. Then Reza Kappa is adding to us a very lot because according to Tanna Kama, you're allowed to. According to Reza Kappa, you're not allowed to. But if you say that according to everybody, you're not allowed to Mechal Shabbos, so then the Reza Kappa says that according to Beis Shammai, you are allowed to Mechal Shabbos. What's he coming to teach me? He's coming to teach me Shidduch Beis Shammai. That according to Beis Shammai, allowed to Mechal Shabbos. For that, the Din of Reza Kappa, because anyway we don't pass like Beis Shammai. Says well, no. Maybe Tanna Kama held that there's no machlokas. That what? That by Emes the Tanna Kama held that everybody holds that there's no dam bris, there's no necessity to do dam bris. That you don't even need to cut anything. According to the Tanna Kama, you don't need to do anything because we rely on a Munolad more. They don't need to do that toughest dam bris. Comes along Rav Kappa says no, that's not pshat. They still say you do need to do our toughest stampers. Only you don't need to do it on Shabbos, you wait for a weekday. And that's how we pass them. That means like this. We pass that Noilad Mol, everybody agrees you have to do our toughest stampers. The whole machlok is B'Shamay B'Sili Liz, are you allowed to Mechal Shabbos or not? The B'Shamay say you're allowed to B'Sili, say you're not allowed to. But we pass like Beis Hillel, so you're not allowed to Mechal Shabbos. So therefore, in the case of a baby born Mol, we have to do our toughest stampers, but we don't do it on Shabbos. Okay, we'll stop over here because it's a new topic. Mitzvah Shiur should start actually Mitzvah on 8 o'clock, really, now that the Mincha has changed. And Yehuda, somebody Yossi had the idea of doing like a serum on Cholent on Thursday. Does that work?
This Thursday.
And this Thursday to finish the perek. Anything can work. So, Tolly, have you heard about it? We should really get somebody sponsored or something to see. I'll sort it out. I can do it myself now.
Oh, brilliant.
Very good.
So, you got a new job.
We have to advertise for a sponsor.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Right.
It's
Okay.
all good?
Yeah, it's all good. Yes.
You know what you're doing with the sticky now and everything.